What do you think is the significance of this meeting today, Wang Yi meeting President Putin in Moscow?
Well, the Chinese want to have control over their partner, Russia, and what they do in terms of escalation, but they also want to make sure there's a pro-China bloc of countries that can stand up to the U.S.-led order. They want power, not so much peace, but they are interested in global stability, so there are limits to both the no-limits partnership with Russia and there are limits to how much China really wants to use its cooperation with Russia against the world rather than just leverage for China in dealing with the world.
And there does now seem to be quite a strong expectation of President Xi actually meeting President Putin sometime soon.
This has been promised essentially out of Beijing. Xi Jinping is meant to go to Moscow, and the fact that President Putin was willing to host Wang Yi in such a fashion that Wang Yi looked like he was the leader of China really prepares the way for Xi Jinping now to swoop into Moscow and look like he's in charge of this partnership.
Clearly, many in the West, including in particular the Americans, are very concerned to see these two superpowers forging a closer alliance. We had Antony Blinken at the weekend warning China not to start providing military support to Russia because so far China has held off doing so, hasn't it?
It has. It's provided more political and economic support, more performative diplomatic support, rather than the kind of arms that we've seen even Iran or North Korea provide.
Do you think, though, that could change? Clearly, Russia would love to have both the military hardware and the symbolism that would come with it.
Well, it could change. I think there were two purposes here. Secretary of State Blinken wanted to show that there were limits to this no-limits partnership because he highlighted the fact that China's not been providing arms to its big partner 1 year into this war. On the other hand, I think Beijing wants to control the possibility of having the opportunity to provide arms to Russia should the U.S. start providing aircraft, for instance, or other extensive missiles. Then China may want to show that it has leverage too in this war.
And how much difference do you think it could make if China were to get involved in supplying military hardware?
Well, it would be a disaster. I think China recognizes that its partner, Russia, has a losing hand right now. It just doesn't want to let Putin lose this war, but it may want to find some face-saving way for him to get out. And if China wants to do China a favor and all of us a favor, it will take peace seriously as a priority, not some empty slogan with a paper being promised 1 year after the war.
Because presumably if China were to get more directly involved in terms of supplying weapons, I mean, what would the response of the West be? I mean, we start to see further sanctions against China with all the repercussions that could have.
A proxy war between the two superpowers, in effect, would be fraught with all sorts of consequences for the world. I don't think it's where Washington or Beijing want to go. So I think there's some restraints. There's more restraint than we give them credit for on both sides here. But at the same time, China does not want to see Russia completely lose this conflict. And the United States doesn't want to see us ignore the fact that the aggression that was started a year ago could still look like it's the rule of law, and we must not let that happen.
And we're already seeing that China has opened up its markets and so on to take advantage of some of the trade that Russia has been prohibited from continuing to the West because of the sanctions imposed across the EU, the UK, the US, and other countries.
And China sees that as legitimate. So they think the economic role is something that they're allowed to do that's different from selling arms. And I think the U.S. would probably agree, even if they are violating some sanctions. We have other big partners like India and Indonesia also buying more oil and gas from Russia. And that's just the way the world works at the moment. But it would be a real red line to cross if China started providing lethal arms to Russia.
So, as things stand at the moment, you think that might be a red line that China wouldn't risk crossing, do you?
I think it is. I think China doesn't intend to cross it. I think it's one reason why Secretary Blinken brought it up. He knows that it's been under discussion. I'm sure we know the Russians would love to have Chinese arms, but China is more circumspect than that. They want to look like they're supporting Russia, but they really do not want to get deeper into a protracted conflict in Europe.